but casting our minds back to 2013, obviously you're coming into a very established band, a new situation. I think it's important to point out, without getting into the music industry drama that was happening, between different labels and competing interests. I think it's important to point out how many times, aside from Queensryche, that has happened. The fact that there were two different Rats at one point, there were two different LA Guns. There were, right now as we're speaking, there's Venom and there's Venom Inc. And there's Morbid Angel and there's I Am Morbid. And, I mean, the list, I think, is longer than people realize if you really
probably, yeah.
It's stuff happens, and it gets worked out and whatever. But casting your mind back to coming into that situation and, and kind of knowing where Queensryche was at creatively with the 2011 record that had come out. What were some of the conversations like within the band as far as, here's the kind of record we want to make, here's a sound we're going for, here's the statement we want, here's the what were you basically tasked with doing, in a sense, right, where they bring you in and they're like, here's what we'd like from you?
So that process with the self-titled in 2013 was really, let's write music. Okay, cool. Do you guys have any cool things that you always wanted to do but it got shelved for some reason? And so they would break out their hard drives and start showing me ideas, and I'd be like, that's badass. What happened to that? Oh, it was considered too heavy, or it wasn't, certain person wasn't feeling it, whatever the case. Okay. And I was like, well, to me, that sounds so Queensryche. Like, can we work on that? Yeah. So everybody just, pulled together those song ideas, and some stuff was created brand new from scratch. Other stuff were just a little tiny baby riff of an intro of an idea. And that got developed even more. And everybody was submitting those ideas. And so that record was written relatively quickly. One of the things that I really wanted to, I mean, really, they provided the music, which to me sounded nothing like what I had been hearing for years from the band. And I was like, okay, right out of the gate, we're off to a beautiful start. This is a great landscape. Man, I can really, if you just let me run, I think I could really write some great stuff to this. And so, A World Without, Open Road, I think I wrote the lyrics and melodies to Open Road in like one night. And it's one of my favorite songs I've ever written with the band. Everything just came together seamlessly, to be honest. It was super fun. Everything was democratic. There was no, well, you stick to that. And like, I was writing drum parts with Scott. Like, if he was busy working on some, the guys would send me a piece of music and I email him, hey, do you care if I put drums to this? Because I know what I'm doing. And he said, no, if it's going to help move the process, absolutely. Yeah, by all means, go ahead. Okay. So everybody was working with each other and it was awesome. I remember there was a song, the first song I ever wrote with Michael Wilton was called Don't Look Back, and it made it on the record. And it was something he had emailed me when we kind of first met as some pieces of music. And it was like more of a rocker. And I really fought when the producer James Barton came in. He was brought in, and I was like, holy crap, this guy's done. He's worked with Queen. I think he's worked with Steve Perry, Matchbox 20, yada yada, like Billy Squier, like Men at Work, like this huge discography. And he also mixed and did Operation Mindcrime and Empire and Promised Land
records. Heard of those.
And so I thought, wow, this is the guy that did Empire, like one of the greatest sonically sounding, best sounding records that everyone was testing their car stereos on at the time. And,
yeah.
PAs, and it was just so perfect. I thought, wow, I can't believe this is the guy I'm gonna work with. So I got to work with him, and there were ups and downs, and I had to really fight for my voice, uh, because I wasn't somebody that had a discography under my belt and all this experience with making records, but I
Mm.
had been playing my whole life. I have very good ears, and I felt that. So I guess where I'm going with this is I fought quite hard to get "Don't Look Back" on that record, and I said that the album needed something with some bite to it and some heaviness to it. There was some disagreement between he and I on that issue, and we clashed quite a bit, um, with certain creative things, with what I deemed as heavy and what I thought was in the direction that the band needed to go in as a fan.
Mhm.
I didn't want to make a record full of Jet City Womans. I wanted to make a hard rock record with some metal elements, and I want to be able to do some high screams, and like I want to let me do what I do.
They got you. They got a guy who can do it.
you
So
know so
let you
yeah so
yeah.
so I was all about wanting to bring more heavy stuff into the band while being very mindful and wanting those other very dynamic sounds that Queensryche can have. I did not want to alienate that aspect of the band, but I absolutely wanted some balls to this. And it's a short record, but it's a really great record. I don't like the way it came out mastered, and it's very harsh. I remember the mixes sounding good, and then when the final product was done, it was very ear fatiguing, and I don't know, man. It was just the final result just fell really flat. It got a lot of criticism for the mastering or whatever, but it was just like this loudness wars thing.
I was just about to
It,
ask you, was it a victim of the loudness wars? And
I guess so. I don't know who mastered it. I don't even remember. I don't even care. But the end result was like, wow, dude, like we worked with like this legendary cool guy veteran that's this thing should have sounded so polished, and and it just didn't live up to what I expected it would. Um, but nevertheless, it was an honor to work with James Barton, regardless of some of the disagreements we had. I do respect him. He is a really nice guy, but he's also an older guy that's been around this for so many times, so long. I think some of these veterans get a little jaded, their communication skills. I like to do it in pieces. Whereas, he wanted me to sing each song like 7 times all the way through and then comp those parts together. And I don't want to do that. I said, well, if I'm singing 7 times through, by the time the last part comes in, I might not have the umph that I want to give it. And so I like to work in a certain way. I don't like to be ridiculed and chastised, and I'm the kind of guy that'll just say, fuck it, I'm going home. I don't care. And that was well known that I need, I need good constructive criticism and coaching as a producer, not, you know, uh, not something different. And I'm not here to, by all means, I'm not here to criticize the person.
no, I don't.
But everyone has a certain way of doing things, and that way of doing things just wasn't cohesive with how I work. And I thought, look, if you want the best out of me, this is how I really need to do it. And the record came out. The songs were great. I love what we worked on as a band. It was definitely that fork in the road, and here was a new path that Queensryche was on. Um, and a lot of people that may have slipped off, had gotten off the train, they were like curious again and listening, and they were excited, and they were like, wow, okay, this sounds like more like the Queensryche that I've been wanting to hear. And people's ears were perking up, and opportunities were presenting themselves for live shows for the band. And it was just amazing, man. It was such a, granted, there was a lot of turmoil because of the legalities and all that stuff, but creatively it was awesome. I'm in the band Queensryche. Are you kidding me? And now I'm recording a record, and I'm working with Jimbo Barton, who's done this amazing catalog of work, and it started opening doors for me to other artists that I don't think I may have crossed paths with them at some point in life, but certainly this accelerated that. And now I'm at some awards things in LA, and I'm not a schmooze kind of guy. Like, I don't like to play the game, but I was able to meet some really seasoned people in the industry, whether they were artists or people behind the curtains that really make shit happen. And so that was a really, like, okay, I think I'm on this new venture, because I owned and operated my own business for 20 plus years at that point. And I didn't need to do that. It wasn't like music was all I knew, and here I'm the starving artist. Like, I was like, whatever, I'm not going to be a starving artist. I'm going to do something else. And I loved what I was doing, but I thought, okay, I think this is going to be like a real career now, not weekend warrior type stuff. And like, oh, this is a real organization with some weight. And it was life changing. And but that first record was a big deal.
Mhm.
In fact, when this tattoo of the Tri-Reich that I have here, I figured I earned my stripes, and I got that after the first record that I did with the band.
It's like joining an outlaw biker club. You got your patch. You did prospected, and you got patched in on that record.
Kind of like it, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really something special in that, I think, and not to belabor the point about the producer, but certain producers and certain band members, even as bands continue, you really start to get into that mindset where you're constantly chasing this, how can we broaden the scope of what we're doing? How do we make it more diverse? How do we make it more accessible? How do we make it easier to get into for certain folks? And it's understandable, and oftentimes there's great art that comes from that.
Yeah.
But you also have the potential to really sort of lose your way and kind of not hold on to the real essence and the strength of what mattered in the first place, and what you personally loved about making it in the first place. And so, to have that shot in the arm of someone coming from the outside of the band, who loves the band, who is now in it, you have that perspective where you've got one foot in, one foot out, sort of, as you're coming through the door.
Right.
And you had an opportunity to get in there and do what every fan wanted to do in terms of the creative thing of, like, here's what we've been wanting to hear. Like, let's put some of this in here. Like,
That's what I
chose me to be here, so let me do what I do.
Yeah, and that was something that, it's like, how do you say that in a respectful way without feeling like you're pissing on these guys that you care about? And I would just be like, listen, as a fan, I want to hear acrobatic vocals. As a fan, I don't want to hear, like, talking through verses and, like, this slow, like, as a fan, this is what I miss from the band. This is why I quit buying your records. This is why I didn't care if you came in concert. This is why, and let's be honest, the majority of your fan base likes those first 5 albums, and we'll throw Promised Land in as a 6th just because there's some really cool shit on there.
I was literally about to say 5.5.
Right.
Yeah.
5.5. So, I was like, I'm not trying to discredit your creativity and your work for the last however many years, but let's be honest, it's Eyes of a Stranger, it's Take Hold of the Flame, it's Queen of the Reich, it's It's NM156, it's The Warning, it's Roads to Madness. It's like this back catalog stuff. Nobody wants to hear anything from Dedicated to Chaos. Nobody cares about Tribe. Nobody cares about in the context. I mean, yeah, there are people that like it,
Yeah.
but the hardcore fan base, in my opinion, it's just an opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Want this. And these are the sounds that were just pivotal, and pivotal is the wrong word, indicative of your sound. This is what your audience loves and they want to hear. And it doesn't have to be all the time, but we have to be mindful and bring these elements back. And this is the stuff that I like to do too. And they were like, I think that when I came into the band, they were also like, man, yeah, we can totally do that shit now without feeling stifled. And it
Right.
was like, okay, so it wasn't like I was trying to do something nobody else wanted to do. I
Right.
was just saying, hey, since we're all talking about creativity, I think it would be really cool if we did this heavy thing that you're doing. Like, I love that. And that's something that I think your audience will really appreciate. And there, it was a general consensus and everyone agreed. And the making of that record was so much fun. There was no bickering about creativity on that record at all. I mean, it was a really fun process um, to make that record, and it didn't take very long to do, to be honest.
And pulling it back to Van Halen a little bit, that was always a thing where Ed was getting into keyboards like in Jump,
Right.
and he had someone in the band, for all of his strengths and talents and charisma, who was saying, "You're a guitar hero, man. People don't want to hear you play keyboards." And was going, all right. And then someone else comes in and is like, "No, do your thing. Keyboards sound fun." And then you get Dreams, and I love all the Van Halen records with Roth. I love all the records with Sammy. A
Yeah.
lot of it is like you're pointing out, just having that just a new perspective. It's not to say one's wrong, one's right,
Right.
but
It's just something different.
and opening the floodgates to like, hey, maybe this is some stuff that you wanted to try, you wanted to have that you weren't able to.
Right.
You're there saying, I'm all about it, so bring it on.
Right.
And they go,
Yeah. And I loved the slower stuff. I was like, man, this is this big canvas where I can do this really emotional type of delivery, and the push and pull vocally, and really um kind of exemplify that other dynamic that was so prominent in the Queensryche vocal delivery. And I wanted to highlight that ability and that those textures in the music. So yeah, the first record was a huge historical moment for the band, because
Mhm.
nobody, I mean, he was the original guy for 30 years or whatever, and here comes this other person. So it was a big deal, and I'm very proud of that record. Everyone in the band is proud of that record. um I mean, one day I would love to do like a best of compilation, and pick those best songs from those records that I've been a part of, and it would just be
Hell
amazing.
yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah, I'd love to fight with you over the track list. It'd be fun. What gets in there? Do you remember the last thing to kind of put a bow on the self-titled? You mentioned having an opportunity to rub elbows a little bit with heroes, peers, people that you might not have thought you'd have a chance to meet. Do you remember anything kind of early on when people finally got to hear you on a record with Queensryche? Anything that was particularly encouraging, or anybody who gave you the pat on the back or the nod, or said like, "Hey man, yeah."
um I'm trying to think of somebody that I don't recall, like somebody like a peer, or somebody way up there that I admired, that necessarily commented on the record, but the live shows,
Mm,
we were playing, Michael Schenker and Accept played with us, and um oh gosh, we did a show with Halloween, and so those singers had come up to me and said, "Hey man, wow, like you're doing a killer job. You're totally representing the back catalog. And they had said, because there was some stuff on YouTube, like, I heard a couple tunes from the new stuff that you guys put out that was on YouTube. And man, it sounds like the Queensryche that I love, and just keep up the good work and that kind of thing. So
I love that.
that was really cool. But I think just kind of I remember there being like, if I were introduced to someone, it was like, oh hey, this is Todd. He sings for Queensryche. If I didn't know them, there was it was almost like instant street cred. Like, oh wow, okay. Like, even if they never heard me,
Yeah.
or they
You,
they didn't even know
you
what I
must
sound like.
have something going on if
Yeah,
that's
you must have something going on, where I met like Phil Anselmo or Zach Wild or some of these. Hey, this first time I met him. Hey, this is Todd. He sings for Queensryche. Um, that kind. I remember being interviewed by Jack Osborne uh, at one of the events,
yeah.
and it was funny because I didn't recognize him at first. My head was in some other place, and I was like, "This guy looks so familiar. Who do I?" And I said to somebody in the band, I'm like, I go, "Hey, who's that guy we just interviewed with going down the red carpet thing?" And they're like, "Oh, that's Ozzy's kid. That's Jack Osborne." I was like, "That's right. Holy shit." And so he was like, "Hey, I've heard," and he mentioned the record and talked about a couple songs. And so then after, I'm like, "Wow, okay." So like Jack Osborne, that's pretty cool. And so there was just all these people
Yeah.
that I got to meet that were peers, whether it was Don Dokken or Tony Harnell from TNT or Mark Slaughter or David Draymond, because I didn't grow up listening to them because they weren't even a band that I knew of. But just people that were in the scene, that were
Established.
that were established and well known, and that kind of thing. And then meeting Nico McBrain and Steve Harris, and those kinds of things. Playing when we were on tour with the Scorpions, singing in Nico's, third row or whatever, and like he's watching us perform, and I'm thinking, okay, this is pretty awesome. And then getting to meet with him, and he was so complimentary of my voice, and I was like, wow, dude, like, you play with Bruce Dickinson, like that's a big compliment. And
Yeah.
gave me his number, and he's like, oh, if you ever want to come down to my house, we'll play snooker. And then he says,
If you're ever in Florida, you're like, I'm in Florida all the time,
well,
actually.
that's what I said. I said, oh, I live in St. Pete. He's like, oh, well, I do this thing where we play live for, I think it was a charity thing or whatever. And, if you want to come down, we could jam, and you could sing some songs or whatever. And like when that was happening, I think we were out of town. So I had to respectfully decline. But I still have his cell phone number, and I should probably text him one day and say, hey, dude, I'm going to come down to your restaurant. You gave me an open invite, so I'm just letting you know if you're around. Cool. But just getting to meet these kind of people that I grew up as a drummer learning, Revelation and Where Eagles Dare and all this kind of stuff. And it's like that surreal moment, I'm sure, for you too, because you know everybody now, and you're friends with so many people that, if we go back to our 16, 17, 18-year-old selves, thinking that you're going to know who you know on a first name basis, and there's a mutual respect, you wouldn't believe yourself. So that album was the beginning of something very special, and I don't take it for granted. I'm very thankful and humbled by the experiences. And if it all ended today, man, I got to do way more than I ever thought I would be able to accomplish. So no regrets.
I love that. I love that.